Hey, welcome everyone to the show. Last week was pretty busy with the Chironomid episode. I was in Vancouver enjoying my 64th birthday.
We missed you. We missed you. And we figured you might not be around that much longer, so we really made the best of it without you.
It feels like it. So we've got Brandyn, Benny the Magnificent, and Rob/Hollywood. And we're here tonight to talk about gear.
All right.
So lots of questions about gear. So we thought we'd dive in and answer some questions, chat about what rigs we have set up, how we use them, and all that good stuff. So
you want to start with a little overview of what we use, or do you want to just go right into questions?
Is there any questions there? If not, we can go into some stuff.
I think people are still coming in, so I think might be, hey, we got a happy birthday, Clint.
Thanks.
Right on.
So let's just chat a little bit about gear. Brandyn, what do you use as far as a rod and reel setup?
Pretty much what you see in front of you here is what I'll be rocking for the season. So there's 4 rods in total. I have 2 LK Legacies from TFO, and I pair those with the LK3 reels. That's the one that Benny's playing with there. And then I have a 9-foot 6-weight ORVIS Clearwater, as well as a 9-foot 6-weight ORVIS Helios 4D. Those ones are new for this season. We dabbled with them a little bit last year. And so on the Clearwater, we've got this Clearwater reel. So that's a 3 or a 4, I believe. I think it may be does it say on there, Benny? I think it's a 4. I can't remember. It's a larger size arbor anyhow.
It's a 4.
Yeah. And then the neat thing about the Clearwater setup that I liked was that's essentially the whole setup. So it's a quality reel, comes with 2 spools in a pack, and basically I'll have a floater here, and then this is a 1.3 seamless density sinker, and then this is a 5.7 seamless density sinker. So pretty versatile when I'm out there. I like to have these sinkers with me as well as 2 floaters with me. If I'm solo and I need to fish 2 floaters, then I can.
Yep.
And then just having the ability to reach different depths with the different sink rates. And then, of course, if we're doing a filming day or something like that, and Rob's in the boat or somebody else is in the boat, often I'll have the 5.7 and a floater rigged up. Those are probably the 2 lines I reach for the most. So that's kind of the rod, reel, and line part of it. I guess for line, the floaters are both going to be the same. There'll be the Anadro indicator in the Amplitude Smooth series. I've done the textured and the smooth, and for me, personal preference is just in the smooth. Nothing wrong with the textured at all. I do like the smooth for the fact that it's a little bit more quiet. Textured is a little noisy in the guides.
Yep.
Some guys like that kind of thing. You get enough noise out of the reels, that's good enough for me. And then I fish with that guy too, so.
You know I was biting my lip. I'm sitting over here going, I got a couple things I can throw across the table, but I'll just shut up. Leave one over here. Okay.
How about you, Benny?
Yeah, well, so I really love feeling different rods, trying different lines. I get a lot of enjoyment, a lot of mileage out of feeling for differences between rods and then how those rods react differently using different lines. So I love switching it up. I somehow ended up being the 10-foot guy, not out of any strategy at all. At some point, I bought a used 10-foot fly rod. It broke. Loomis sent me a 10-foot NRX Plus on warranty. Fantastic rod. And then I ended up buying a used Sage 1 in a 9'6". Now I've got a ORVIS Clearwater in a 9'6", and a ORVIS Helios 4D in a 10-foot. And quite honestly, I love them all. They're and I do have a TFO LK Legacy in a 9-foot that I enjoy, but that's my only 9-foot rod right now. Reels, I was lucky enough to be a recipient of a Clearwater package, so I'll be using that this year. I've loaded it. I've loaded them all with sinking lines, actually, intermediate and 2 sinkers, and I actually have an old Orvis bat and kill. It was funny. It's one of those things where I stretched myself financially at the time, like 20 years ago, and bought the best reel I could, and it is still 100% like A1 today.
You just tell yourself that you're worth it.
Over and over again. One day you're going to be 64 years old. That's right. You're going to appreciate.
Be on a fixed income.
Well, that I already am. I keep saying that the pay for real time is not does not put me in another tax bracket.
Never mind.
Anyway, so that's it for rods and reels, and yeah, for lines, I too been fishing the Anadromous indicator for a floater and the range of Scientific Angler lines. I haven't in the past had a ton of success with Rio lines, and that's kind of, and I have with Scientific Anglers, so that's kind of where I lie there, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Exactly. How about you, Rob?
Okay, so the LK Legacy is kind of my go-to backup, not backup rod, my mainstream rod, the one that I know is going to work all the time. I've got the Helios 4D with the Mirage reel and a floater this year, and then I'm going to pack the Clearwater, Orvis Clearwater with the reel kit, and all my sinkers are going to go on the Clearwater reel kit.
That's the Mirage there.
Awesome.
Yeah, it looks cool. I haven't fished this yet. I did fish the Helios last year for a few days at the end of the year, and I was super impressed with it. I can't wait to give it a workout. Yeah, I love it. It feels really good. I think we'll see how it fishes.
Slate gray and green color combination.
Yeah, looks great for sure. No question there.
Super light, like ridiculously light, that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm going to have an Anadromous smooth on the Orvis Helios, and I think I'm going to put the textured on the LK. So it'll be my 2 floaters, and then everything else will go on. The sinkers will all go on the Clearwater.
Awesome.
What about you, Clint?
Oh, I'm kind of in the transition, switching from 7-weight setups into 6-weight. So I've got a 10-foot loop rod and a TFO Legacy rod, and I just swapped over to a forged reel that I love. Value for money.
Tough to beat on those things.
Tough to beat. Yeah, it's just a great little reel. It suits me just fine.
We fished those last fall and summer, kind of before we brought them into the shop, and I was pretty impressed for the price point. It's it's a workhorse. Like, that thing is just, yeah.
So we have a couple of questions, guys. YP Whistler is asking if you dangle the 5.7 sink line.
Yep.
Yep, that's your go-to dangle.
It's my only full sinker.
Yep.
So I use that to, walk dragonfly nymphs. I use it to strip boobies and blobs. I dangle with it. Yeah, it's kind of my go-to as far as a sinker goes, or a fast sinker anyways. Having that extra weight down at the bottom, while I don't know if it makes a huge difference, it obviously will help to kind of keep things where they need to be, especially in the deep water.
Yep. Cumulonimbus asked what kind of intermediates you guys like to use, clear camo, or do you just go for the clear see-through line?
So I run the clear camo.
Me too.
I think all of us pretty much run that for the really shallow stuff.
Yep.
The 1.3 is kind of my next go-to. A little bit quicker sink than the Camo, but as far as like a shallow water weapon, if you're moving flies, it's tough to beat that clear Camo.
So I personally haven't had a season with a clear Camo yet. I just received it. I was up until now I was using it was a Scientific Angler intermediate line that I believe was a prototype and might not have ever actually been issued. But I don't fish an intermediate line, like a slime line, much. I do find that a lot of the time you can cover same water with a naked float, like a floater with naked indicator, and just adjusting your indicator length.
I think the biggest use that I get out of that clear Camo is in the late fall when we pull out the big leeches, and they're a lot of times unweighted, but you're moving those things pretty quick through the water, and that's where that line keeping it down 2 or 3 feet helps. That's about the only time a floater, the fly is going to come too high in the column.
Totally. If you're retrieving quickly, it will absolutely.
90% of the time, Ben's right. You can get away with that, but I really lean on that thing in the fall with the big leeches on the move because it's super productive.
There are times though, and there was a couple times with a particular lake where they love the scuds, the big Gamma scuds, and I tested it.
Yep.
And honestly, it was much better with the clear Camo or the intermediate, and that fly working horizontal. And I know it's hard to believe that like a long leader on a floater wouldn't have the same presentation, but it was definitely made a difference.
If Rob's taking his floater off, then there must be a difference.
And I specifically wanted to test that theory because they were stuffed with these things, and how can I present it differently just to see? And it made a difference. So sometimes it's worth the time. Take the time to switch up.
Yeah.
Okay, great question by Osworth. If you had to make a choice and cheap out on something, would it be your rod, your reel, your line? Which would you choose?
I will come right out and say, so I've just received in the last couple of years a bunch of really beautiful SA sinking lines. Prior to that, I was using I don't remember the line. That's not the series, let's say, but both Rio and Scientific Angler full sink lines for my booby fishing and stuff like that. And I think they sitting around the $30 to $40 price range. So, and I haven't fished my new line enough to be able to say what the difference is, but I feel like I got away just fine with a Type 7 in that mid-level in, like I say, both the Rio and Scientific Angler. So you can save a good chunk of change there.
You're saying line.
Would you say the same thing about your floaters, though? Or is it sink line only? Curious to the answer to that one.
Well, no floating line that I've fished compares to the Scientific Angler and Agro, to be quite honest.
Yep.
I do have a couple buddies that bought lines on Amazon and say they're great and they replace them every couple of years. I don't know. I'd rather not, to be honest. I'd rather just have one line that performs over the long haul.
I never even thought about these sinking lines when you brought it up. I was just totally went to floater. And so for me, the answer is reel. When I have fly reel would be what I dump or cheap out on. I guess like if you have a sinking line that sinks.
And that's the kick. When a lot of times when guys come in the shop, if they're looking for just a run of the mill sinker, I don't recommend the 5.7. That frequency line is fairly inexpensive. Comes in a Type 4, 5, 6. I mean, they're fast sinking lines that get down. They're a little shorter than the other ones, but unless you're too concerned about casting 80 plus feet, it doesn't really make a difference. But sinking lines are pretty much sinking lines for the most part until you get into the dual or triple density type stuff where it does different things. But I think I'm with Rob. I would probably ditch or cheap out on the reel. I think The other thing about reels nowadays is, that I'm not saying it is cheap, but that forged is pretty reasonably priced. And if you look at what it can do, it's pretty impressive. Like the drag system on it is phenomenal. The design allows for a ton of backing, which is super nice, and still be able to fit these newer, bigger modern day fly lines, floating lines. So, something like that is while it's on the inexpensive side, it still would do me just fine. So yeah, I would probably ditch the reel for sure.
There's one way that you can get away with not going too low end on reels, but saving some money, is if you're running one reel with all your different lines on them, rather than having to buy new spools, cassette or cartridge reels. I have a Hardy one that I absolutely love. Actually, I have a Grays one that I like too. But it's less. Usually, you'll get a package of the reel plus 3 or 4 cassettes, and it's a lot cheaper than buying a reel plus 3 or 4 individual spools.
So
so you can save some money that way.
Cool thing about that one is they've now, instead of doing, so this is what Benny's talking about,
right?
Where you have
that is the exact one,
the cassette style. That's a Hardy there, but so you're just these plastic cassettes. The neat part about this Clearwater setup that they've come out with is that kit you basically buy it the same as you buy this. When I bought this Hardy many years ago, it came with the cassettes. Now they're doing kits like this where they actually come with the spools. So this is a package deal. So, you save by buying everything kind of at once. And then, you can have a floater, an intermediate, and a full sink all on one reel for a pretty reasonable price.
So John Rowe was inquiring about the price point for the Clearwater.
They haven't landed yet. They're going to be sub 400. Like they'll probably be between 300 and 400 somewhere. I don't have the exact figure on me until probably, I'm hoping tomorrow they land here. But they're going to be in that 300 to 400 range for that whole package. Lines aside, just the reel, but the reel, 2 extra spools under in that $300 to $400 range is pretty reasonable, especially for something with that good arbor size. I've got 2 different sizes coming, one step down from that one and that one. So yeah, pretty reasonable.
Awesome. Paul McCluskey's got a question about 7-weight rods versus 6 weights. He's going fishing in Nova Scotia for striped bass and Atlantic salmon. He's wondering if his 6 weights will be enough.
Not for the stripers that I've seen.
Yeah, it might be underground there.
Same with Atlantics. In fact, I don't know a ton about the variance in size, depending on where you fish Atlantics. But I feel like even at 7 weight, for some of the Atlantics I've seen, you might be undergunned.
Yeah, and the striped bass, I mean, I've caught redfish, which are not the same as striped bass, but they get in that, they can get pretty big. And when I did it, the guide wouldn't do it with anything less than an 8 weight. And if you hook into a few of those fish, you learn pretty quick. If you're just going to get into smaller ones, then okay, I guess. But some of those big striped bass could spool you on a 6 weight pretty quickly. So, and Atlantic, same thing, especially in the rivers. If they get in that current, they can go pretty good. So you may want to beef those up a little bit.
YP Whistler has got a question about floating lines, textured versus the smooth in the Scientific Angler, what the differences are, what the methodology and mentality is, I guess, behind the textured versus smooth.
What's the simplest way to explain it? I guess it would be like kind of like a golf ball versus a ping pong ball. It's probably a way to relate to it. If you were to run your finger over the surface of a ping pong ball, there's a decent amount of connection there, and thus more friction. If you were to do the same thing on a golf ball, you're much less friction because of those dimples and the texture that's in that golf ball. And I think that is probably a fair explanation of the two. They both have, that smooth has coatings on it, and they do all kinds of things with them to shoot them through the guide. So, but I think technically the reason that textured often comes out a little bit on top is for that reason. There's just a little bit less friction when it's going through your guides that allows it to shoot a little bit further.
However, it is a bit noisier.
It is
Like,
noisy. Yeah, yeah.
A
You
lot
do hear
less
it.
noisier than the original
shark
shark
skins.
skins. So
Yeah.
so I've been
And
fishing,
not near as abrasive either.
that's
Like,
right.
right.
I've been fishing SA for a long time, and I did go with the shark skin when they first came out with it, and I literally sawed through my Kamloops Dragonfly, the tip of the
guide?
the guide at the
Yeah.
tip, which
Yeah.
they replaced because it was a lifetime rod. But yeah, and then they went to the wave form, and then they've refined it quite well.
Yeah.
It's still a little noisy, but nowhere near what that was.
Yeah, I mean, I had 2 solid years of running that textured line on my LK rod. There's zero wear to any of those guides. You know, and that's a lot of days on the water. I feel like the shark skin would have probably done some damage if it had that many days.
Yeah.
So they've definitely improved there. And yeah, I mean, the thing, it was still going pretty strong after those 2 years, and that'll be a couple hundred days. So yeah, durable as well.
Awesome. Dustin Cadigan's got a question about intermediate lines in the fall, leader and tippet lengths.
I guess it kind of depends what you're doing, but I mean, typically your 9-foot style is probably all you need. If you're ripping leeches quickly, you can go a little shorter. You know, those clear camos are kind of designed to blend in fairly well, but I mean, it all depends how far you want your fly away from your fly line really at the end of the day, or how deep you're fishing. Do you have weight on your fly? Do you not? What do you think about that, Benny?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you can get away with a fairly short line. Like even if I had tied stuff on until I got 5 feet, it wouldn't bug me too much with the clear.
Yeah.
With a clear camo, camo or clear intermediate.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, and probably no shorter for me than 5 feet, but no longer than 10 either. So
yeah,
somewhere around that range for
yeah.
me. Paul's kind of wondering, again, with that striped bass Atlantic salmon, an 8-9 setup would be good enough.
I think so. I mean, honestly, I would defer to maybe a local shop when you get there, or get a hold of somebody that's in the area you're headed to, because I mean, I don't have the experience with that fishery, and maybe your 7-weight is enough. I don't feel like it is, but I would maybe just give a call or shoot an email to one of the shops out there and close to where you're going to be, and I'm sure they can point you in the right direction. It's probably the best advice I can give you, just so you don't spend money where you don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Hey, I think we're caught up with questions. So one of the topics I'd like to delve in with you guys is your leaders, especially for Chironomid setups, floating line setups. What do you run? Why? And how does it change during the season?
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so I'll start. So you said floater first
Yes.
for Chironomids?
Yep.
So pretty basic for me. I do like a tapered leader, even though if we're using indicators, it's not necessary at all. But I just don't like to switch back and forth, and I like to fish without an indicator a lot. So this is the one I started fishing last year and really liked it. Will they see it if I do this? So that's just they call it an indicator leader.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they do that because they color the end.
It's the design of the taper.
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't care less what the color at the end of this is. But the taper it's a quick reduction, and then it's quite thin for the rest of it, which I like. So whether I'm with an indicator or not, I'll be using this first, and then to this, I strap just monofilament. Like so this, if this ends in 7 pounds, I'll take an equivalent weight. Yeah, this is the absolute clear.
Yep.
and it ends in it's the same thickness as the end of the leader. And then to that, I'll go 16, 18, 20 inches of that stuff.
That's Trout Supreme.
Trout Supreme, which is the fluorocarbon. And that's pretty much it for my floater, whether it's indicator or naked.
Yeah, I run a fairly similar setup, except when I am fishing an indicator, I do fish a swivel. Rob's not much for swivels. I typically will run the indicator leader and then the absolute clear down to my swivel, and then from the swivel, somewhere between 18 and 36 inches down to my fly. I just like to have it there. When the bobber releases, it holds it up and keeps it away from the fish. Doesn't fall off the line. Pretty simple, but it's worked for me. So
and you do straight like straight 6 pound or 8 pounds sometimes as well when you're using.
Used to do it a lot more.
Yeah.
There was a lot until last year or the year before, previous years, if I was fishing 20 or 23 feet a leader, often it was just straight run-of-the-mill fluorocarbon. And I would do like an 8 pound and then 6 pound below my swivel. It seems that leaders get longer and longer and longer every year. And so when you get beyond 25 feet, which for us is fishing that quite often, having the taper just makes a big difference. Not so much when you're doing the bobber thing, but when you're fishing naked, I would just accept the fact that my rig wouldn't always turn over properly on a cast. It's no big deal. Eventually it'll sink and it starts fishing the way it should. But when you can get it to lay out properly, especially when you're casting crosswind and allowing it to drift, when that lays out the way it should, you basically start fishing almost immediately. You don't have to wait for your line to unravel and get unbunched before it tightens up. It pretty much hits the water, starts sinking, and everything's nice and tight, and you get a good drift. So I've moved over to that side of things a little bit more. But if you don't want to mess with those leaders, then 20 feet or less, you can usually get away with just straight fluoro or even mono down to your swivel. And then the only place I urge people to spend a little bit is on that business end. So basically from the swivel down or from your last knot down, use something that is thin, supple, strong. We've proven over the last couple of years it makes a big difference.
And Brandon, what's the maximum length that these tapered leaders come in? This one's a 12.
That's a 12, but I think, the presentation leaders are up to 14 feet now. So something like this here. And really the style of taper is the biggest difference between this leader and that leader. So Rob kind of mentioned it. Most tapered leaders just gradually go from thick down to thin. And that thick section, if it's 4, 5, 6, 7 feet long, can sometimes hinder sinking a little bit, where something like that, because the butt section is really short and then it tapers down really quick, it allows for quick sink. And then it also makes it easier as long as you keep your bobber off that first 2 or 3 feet. If you peg the bobber below, it kinks way less than the thick part of these leaders. You put bobbers in them and they get kinked up, and then you raise your bobber a little bit and set it back down. You never have enough weight to straighten that out. And if you forget to straighten it, your fly could be 6 inches or 8 inches or 10 inches higher than you think it is.
And not only the height difference, but the your ability to signal taste, right?
Exactly.
It's shot.
Yeah.
Having said all that, if I had a dedicated indicator rod, I would just go with a straight 6 pound or 8 pound. I wouldn't have a taper at all, just because of those
On
reasons.
an indicator. Yeah.
If I just had a rod that I was always going to have an indicator on, because then you don't have to worry about trying to figure out how much of the bark you have when you're measuring your bottom.
Yeah, it's true. If you fish the bobbers, just run that straight stuff. It does make it easier.
This absolute Trout Supreme is fabulous line. It's super thin for the weight. It's really strong. And, people will remark at the price, but in a day of fishing, if you tie 24 inches of this on, at the end of the day, you're still going to have a foot or 10 if you have, even if you go through flies a couple times.
Yeah.
So you're not going through it real quick. You're going to use a couple feet a day.
There are a lot of guys out there that like to run fluoro for their entire leader setup, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I just wouldn't recommend it. It's not easy on the pocketbook, especially with this kind of stuff. If you're concerned that you need to have fluorocarbon for whatever reason, then buying a run-of-the-mill, what is there? There's Suffix, there's Vanish, there's a bunch of inexpensive fluorocarbons out there that you can use, say, in place of this, maybe this clear, absolute clear. But again, that stuff's going to get down, and I don't think it makes a huge difference.
Buy it on a 200-yard spool.
Yeah.
Right. Suffix on and Vanish on a 200-yard spool Seager tube becomes really economical. But if you're, and honestly, it catches fish. But if you're looking at details, when you look at the weight per diameter of this stuff, it is less than those lines for sure. Like it's skinnier for a given weight.
Right. So if you're going to go with a bulk line or whatever to bridge that gap, you should check your thicknesses, right? Because like I said, I know these are about the same diameter, but you could end up with a really ugly looking knot if you have a bulk that ends at 6 pounds and you're adding your 6 pound, but this 6 pound is way thinner than the 6 pound that you know what I mean? So you got to kind of watch that. Brandyn, when you said some guys run fluoro all the way and it can get quite expensive, it reminded me of, remember the guy in the pontoon boat at Sheridan?
Yes.
When we were, I had a 45-foot leader on a naked line, and I was catching fish, and they had the bobbers and they weren't.
Yeah.
And he says, the fish must be higher because this guy's getting them with the floater. And I said, no, I'm at the bottom. We were in 40 feet of water or something. I said, no, I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom. I have a 45-foot leader. And he says, he wasn't impressed with the fact that I was casting a 45-foot leader. He was concerned. He says, how the hell do you afford?
Yeah, that's what he said.
That's 45 feet of fluoro.
When you're bridging that gap, I understand that, maybe fluoro sinks a little quicker than monofilament. Maybe there's some subtle differences there, but when you have, tungsten fly, it's going to sink that stuff. It's thin enough, it's supple enough that it gets down, and it really makes it way more affordable to, all you're doing is like Rob said, you're bridging a gap, right, between your tapered leader that's going to allow you to turn things over. Then you've got this kind of just section in the middle that you just need to lengthen out and isn't super important. As long as it's going to not break and hold on to the fish that you're catching, it's good enough. And then again, down at the business end, you want it, that's where you spend the money. So the money is spent kind of off the fly line and off the fly. In the middle there isn't near as critical, in my opinion.
We got a bunch of questions about knots, but just to follow up, Terry's asking, are these tapered leaders fluorocarbon?
No.
Not.
No, because if they were, then I'd have to tie, so that's 14 feet, right? Or 12 feet. If they were, then I'd have to tie fluorocarbon to it. I wouldn't want to go fluorocarbon, mono, fluorocarbon. So just go mono all the way and then fluoro at the end.
There are fluorocarbon leaders. We have them on the wall over there. But more, I would reserve something like that for, I can't remember who asked, but whoever was asking about, what I use off, say, a clear camo line. Right. That's a scenario where I might just take a 9-foot leader, loop it to my fly line, and chuck that for the day. If it cuts back to 6 or 5 feet by a whole bunch of fly changes, no big deal. And any shorter than that, it's time for it to go. But that would be where I would bring out a fluorocarbon tapered leader. On this stuff, this works just fine.
If we're talking about gear and setups, and you reminded me when you said loop to loop, on sinking lines where my leader is short enough that it's never coming through my tip top, I don't mind using loops. On my floater line, which often is like 15 to 35 feet of leader and definitely comes through, I cut my loops off, cut them off the leaders, cut them off my fly line, do a nail knot and it comes through the guides way nicer than any loop-to-loop connection I've ever found.
Interesting.
I don't. I'm too lazy.
Yeah, me too. RDS had a question about leader to fly line, loop to loop, or nail knot. So
There you go. You got
two different schools of thought.
Yeah.
Lazy, not lazy.
I want to
Lazy.
show. I want to show a picture of because
Well-
some people who are doing the loop to loop knots as well, or loop to looping the leader. I don't know if I can explain it, but typically what most people do is they take the one loop, stick the leader through it, stick the tag end of the leader through its own loop, and tighten it, and you end up with a really, really tight pull against a small area of the fly line loop.
Yeah.
But if there's another way to do it, I think it's more the correct way. I wish I had the picture. I won't be able to explain it, but what it does is both loops grab each other, and you kind of get this sort of motion going rather than that direct pull. And then it ends up being a little bit smoother and doesn't damage your fly line.
the loops are way more spread out on one another when
Yeah.
you do it that way, as opposed to just
Try to
the
find the
loop
picture.
grabbing here and pulling. It just kind of intertwines. You might be able to find it.
Yeah, I'll look for it.
It's notable, like, we were talking about being lazy, and I'm definitely lazy. Make no mistake about it.
I'm glad you
It's,
said it.
it's just once you do your nail knot once, you've got a tapered leader, however long you choose to have. And then from there, it's always a matter of doing double surgeon knots to attach whatever you want under there. So you do a nail knot once. So you do your nail knot whenever you replace your tapered leader, which for me is once a year.
And I think that's a thing a lot of people forget too, is like with these tapered leaders, the reason we like this stuff so much is it's inexpensive, it's a gap filler, but this is what you end up adding and subtracting throughout the season, not the leader, right? The leader, like Ben says, when you put one of those on, that's going to last you a long time, unless for some reason you snap it or something happens. This is just what you're adding, subtracting, and you're double surging that on there. And one day you might have to add 10 feet, the next day you could take off 6, and so on and so forth. But the leader, you shouldn't be going through a lot of them. And if you are, it might be a little bit unnecessary. Are you able to get that?
I don't think it'll show up.
No.
I mean, I can try to knock this down and do it, I guess. Can you get some questions lined up?
So
there?
you're recommending double surgeons for those connection knots?
That's what I use. That's what I've kind of always used.
It is the easiest, fastest. I see people doing double blood knots, double clinch knots, and just the time they take. I'm always like,
Yeah.
round once, round twice, pull, trim your ends, you're fishing.
This isn't connected anyway, so it doesn't matter if I find it.
Okay.
We're not connected.
Oh, okay.
Paul McCluskey said, pretty impressive casting a 45-foot leader. Wow.
Thanks, Paul. At least somebody's giving me credit for it. That guy wasn't impressed with me catching fish.
His shoulder wasn't impressed at the end
No,
of the
my
day.
shoulder wasn't either.
So just a quick thing on that. At that depth, it doesn't matter if, it doesn't have to be pretty. Your fly is not turning over.
What are you saying? It wasn't pretty?
It wasn't pretty. Maybe it was. When I do it, it's not pretty. You make sure that you've got the wind working in your direction.
Absolutely.
And however it piles up, as long as it doesn't twist or loop. But it does. If it coils and piles up, it doesn't matter. And the other thing is you cast your fly line when you cast the fly line. You don't worry so much about what the leader is doing, and it becomes doable. I know, we're not envisioning you see the typical we're not doing what we see as the typical side profile where your leader comes and lays out like that. That's not what happens with 45 feet of leader.
And 40. Remember that 45 is the extreme.
It is totally.
If we talk about in our courses, we talk about getting the students to basically cast, or practice casting as long a leader as they possibly can, because there are times where if you can't cast a long leader, you just won't catch fish. But if I had to pick a number that is doable for just about everybody, and you know, is kind of where I think the minimum would be. Is I think I would probably pick 35 feet.
25 to 35 feet, sure.
Right? I mean, it's
You should be able to do that.
that 30-foot water is fairly common to fish in, and often you need upwards of 35 feet to get to it. So, yeah, I mean, the 40 and 45, I've done it a handful of times when he's kicking my butt and I'm forced to do it. But again, you know, at least that 30 to 35 foot zone, if you can get comfortable casting that, then you can be pretty confident you're going to come out ahead in most situations.
James has got a comment about why not just a deep line with a full sink instead of a 45-foot leader. Then you can't keep the boats away.
So if you've ever fished Sheridan, you know that the only way to keep the people away is to be able to say, I got a line out there, get out of the way. No, because there's a couple reasons, and that particular day, nothing was happening for anybody that was fishing straight down. So I just decided to try something different, just to get a different presentation. Remember, when you're fishing straight down and the fish are in a zone, well, once your fly's there, you're done, right? And if they don't want it stationary, sure, you have a little bit of vertical. You could probably move it a little bit upwards, but it's not long before it's out of the zone. Yeah. So when you fish a naked line, now I can cover a ton of water, and I can also, if they want it moving, I can move it in that water as well. So that's one reason. Number two, I like doing stuff when I'm fishing. So if I can get to the depth I need to with a floater and a long leader, it's my preference, just because I feel like I'm fishing rather than just sitting there mooching or whatever you want to call it.
You've got something to do with your hands.
And the retrieve unquestionably is night and day different. And some days you don't need it. Some days they slam the vertical line great.
Right. Yeah.
But some days they don't.
Right.
You need a different retrieve, and no question is 100% different.
Right. I'll mention one more thing, and I mean, we're talking here deep water, so it's usually not an issue, but let's say you're not as deep, but you're still 25 feet. We experienced it this last year, where if you got super, super clear water, it's not to say that fish are spooked under your boat because they're still coming through, but I think sometimes they still may be leery and maybe not be as eager to fight, because I've found that if I cast away from the boat at that same depth and leave it sink, like even with a bobber, say, you can do better sometimes than close by. So there's that spooky fish theory of mine as well. Even though they're there, if they know there's a boat above them, they might not be as eager to grab it. And I don't know if that's a thing or not, but that's what I think.
Well, I mean, the movement thing, I mean, I believe you when I was there multiple times when we've had to do that, but the whole movement thing is,
for sure.
That is hands down. Like there's days where you can try and dangle it underneath the boat, but the guy chucking and retrieving is going to get him, and you're not. It's a difference. It just is.
Welcome, Tim. I like your avatar there. Jay's got a great question. You just cut the loop off of that. Doesn't it compromise the expensive fly line when you're tying on a nail knot?
Only if you wanted a loop on it. Like I say, with the anadrome, the Stillwater anadrome it's an expensive line. I know that on my main floater, I'm never going to want a loop on there, because I
think he's more. Are you exposing the core?
Right. I think if you do your nail knot tight, you're not exposing your core.
Yeah.
Right. I know a lot of people
probably
do
what
it
he's referencing,
or seal it with some aqua seal or something like that.
Yeah.
But and dude, I used to cut every one of my loops as well, because the first loops that came out were shit, and they'd unweld, and that's where I'd have resistance on that tip. Ever since, like, I have not had a problem with the SA loop, and I don't find it much different than just a nail knot. But when I used to cut them, if you get your nail knot, like you get 9, 10, 11 wraps, and you get that nice and smooth and you tighten it, you don't get any water in your line.
Yeah.
Okay, Cumulonimbus has got a question about leader setup for clear water. I'm assuming floater for dries, floater for subsurface or intermediates. I may have missed this earlier.
I didn't understand the question.
Where is your leader setup for clear water?
No different than the leader setup for any water.
I mean, longer, I guess, if you're trying to hide your fly line or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would in clear water, I would anchor a little bit further back, and that's where you're relying on a bit of a longer cast, and that's why even though so much of the time you can get away with really short casts, and in fact, I think most of the time casting short is actually the way to go. But the time that it isn't is when you're in shallow, clear water. You need to be away from where the fish are cruising for sure, especially on a calm day. You need to be away from it, and so you're relying on your cast, not so much your length. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be. I mean, windy days too. We talk all the time about matching the right reel and rod or line and rod together. For scenarios just like that. I think it's a little bit of a misconception that because you're in a boat, you don't need to cast far, like Ben said. But days where you're on super clear situations like that, we've had plenty of days where the fish are up on a shoal, and if we were to go anchor on that shoal, we would just drop anchor and spook them off. So you're forced to anchor out in deep water. If that wind is in your face, you got to be able to punch your rig through that wind, and that's a scenario where having a quality rod and a line matched with it can be the difference between getting it in there or not being able to get in there. So.
Awesome.
I think we just lost a question here. I didn't want to lose for Terry. Terry asks about the SA tapered leaders. Are they all fluorocarbon? They're not, Terry. I think we showed you the one we use most of the time is just a standard.
They're copolymer.
Yeah.
There are like I say, there are fluorocarbon. There's leaders of all kinds of materials out there. But
did you already get it?
I did, yeah.
This is just what we.
So this is the second we're answering.
Yeah.
Is it really? I don't remember that one.
Me neither.
That's
No.
because I know how to circle back, okay?
Oh.
You know how to circle
Rough.
something, I'm pretty sure.
Next question, please.
Next question. So we've got a pretty fancy boat box at the end of the table there. Maybe just walk us through what some options are for a bag that can kind of hold everything that you need, Brandyn.
Yeah, I mean this is the ORVIS Pro Boat Box. It's probably at first I thought it might be a little more than I needed. Once I got all my gear inside of it, I was kind of pleasantly surprised. I mean, this reel pouch here, this one here. When you have extra spools, extra reels, we run the old school Scotty rod holders, fly rod holders.
You need about 10 of these when you're fishing with Rob.
Unfortunately, I fish with Rob, so I do need a lot of
Dedicated
those.
compartment. Just
So
cram.
I'll tilt this forward, and this section here is just for pumps. But I thought it maybe would be too much, but I don't know if you can see, like, it's pretty dialed. I've got my fly boxes in here. I've got a bigger compartment for the rod holders, for that kind of thing. The reel pouch fits in there. Another one, I've got some little kind of stuff like that. Keeps all your bobbers together. I've got, multiple sets of forceps that sit in here. There's another set there. I've got a couple different pairs of nippers that attach on. Inside here, I keep all my different leaders, so I'm always ready to go with that. Let's see what else is in here. I don't know, this could be risky business for us.
That's a fish with
Some
We
pit
got
stick.
some
you know.
sunscreen. No, that's sunscreen.
And then speed stick.
Sunscreen. That's good stuff, actually. That roll-on sunscreen is way better. It doesn't mess up your fly lines.
good
What
tip.
else have we got? We've got some desiccant. So indicator markers.
This is
you know,
excellent for me to know where
just
Brandyn keeps everything.
all
in his fly
the
box.
all the little odds and sods that you need when you're doing this stuff tucked in here nicely. And then this side is all just extra tippet material. So I've got more Trout Supreme tucked in there. And of course on the top, I've got my 3X, 4X, 5X loaded up, ready to go. And then here I've got a fly patch for drying flies, that kind of thing. And
It's waterproof on the bottom, it looks like.
put my lunch on the top. It is, yeah, it's completely waterproof. Everything, it's got welded zippers to it, and it's good and sturdy. So like I say, I thought maybe it was a little much at first, but after getting all my stuff in there, Now that I have it organized, it still fits inside my big duffel bag. So essentially, I've got this in the center, a whole bunch of gear on this side, a whole bunch of gear on that side. I grab my duffel and I go fishing, and I don't forget stuff. That's the biggest thing.
Which
to have
side are the
everything with you.
prototype flies in?
Never mind.
John Rose got a comment here I thought I'd present. He said, Clint's on it. Keep up, guys.
We're trying.
Okay, thank you, John.
Shots fired.
Just to add on, so when I first saw this bag, I thought it was maybe a little bit on the big side, and actually after seeing it full of Brandon's gear,
Pretty nice.
It's no more cumbersome than my reel bag and fly suitcase, as Rob likes to call it. But my fly case, I use one rather than a bunch of small ones, and my reel bag, and this is not more cumbersome than that. So actually, it's growing on me a lot.
Yeah, after I got everything in there, I realized pretty quick it allows me to not have to leave anything behind or leave any of my fishing things in my big bag. I like to have everything I'm going to use to fish in one bag that I can just pull out of the duffel and be ready to go. And now I've got that. So
Osworth has a question about different colored indicators depending on weather, sunny, cloudy, favorite colors. And I can answer last fall when I was fishing in the fog, my pink indicator was impossible to see. I wish I had a yellow one or a green one. And I have eventually found an old one that was pretty dinged up, but I put that out and made all the difference in the world because the fish weren't hitting hard at all. So it's good to have different colors for sure on light conditions.
Yeah. I found generally the opposite. Generally, they're if I only have yellows like chartreuse, there are a lot of conditions, especially when you have a little bit of glare, where it doesn't show up well at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in general, I find that your orange and hot pinks are better than the chartreuse, but there are definitely some light conditions where the chartreuse is the one to be in for sure.
and that one's, I guess I pretty much got chartreuse, the red, orange, and pink. I don't use the green ones very often. Do you use the green ones ever?
Mine are mostly white.
6 years old.
Yeah, 10-year-old bobbers.
Love it.
Been in and out of his pocket 14 times.
Terry's got a question about your boat bag. Is there a designated space for sandwiches?
Sandwiches, that's the beauty of it's nice, and you could put your sandwich right on top. And yes, there is plenty of room for sandwiches.
Pepperoni
in the
slash
top.
jerky holder.
The
Yep.
top of that's a great size for a cutting board for when we're.
Yeah.
That's what, see?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this will have multi-uses, don't worry.
Retail cost on those approximately.
In the 400 to 500 range.
Nice bag though. Impressive.
What are you going to get for $400
I know.
These days, a couple sandwiches.
Couple sandwiches, yeah.
It's something, when, like I said, I mean, it was a little bit like, is it over the top? Is it more than what I need? But I guess one thing I've learned in the whole fishing world, and with as much as we do it, gear can make a difference. And this is something that I'll get a good amount of years out of. And so, okay, even if I get, 5 years out of the thing, I think I'll probably get longer than that. But if I do, at $75 a year,
You're worth it.
it's less than $1 a day.
You're
And
worth it.
Clint says that I'm worth it. So
Don't let anybody tell you different.
it's so when you break it down, under $1 a day on the water makes sense, right?
The trick is to fish way more than you usually do.
That's
And then
right,
You
then-
break it down per day.
That's
it's
right.
nothing.
Comes
Pennies.
to,
That's all it takes.
totally.
The unit
And
cost really
and-
drops.
Pennies per day.
that's right. And then when you're trying to explain it to your partner, it's like, well, I have to go to make the fishing bag be more
I
of
gotta
a
get.
good deal.
I bought this stuff. I need to get the
I
value
need
out
to
of
get the use
Return
of
on
it.
investment,
Return
honey.
on investment.
Return-
That's
yeah,
right.
it's all about the ROI.
That's right.
Should be thanking you.
Barbara D's got a
Come to me
question.
come to me for more relationship
For more,
advice.
Yeah.
more relationship advice, come and see us.
Okay, that's a different show.
That's a different show, yeah.
Barbara D's got a question about Garmin Striker 4 Fish Finder.
Yeah.
Do you change the settings or you just turn it on?
Well, now we just turn it on, but initially, yes, you want to dial in your settings for sure. We use the A scope on ours, and then primarily the Chirp 77 is the
Correct,
one that with the cone that we use, There are times when we get out, typically beyond 40 foot of water, we will split the screen and use the 200 cone as well. But again, fairly rare. But once you have it pretty much set up, I don't know that I've messed with mine literally since I inputted those settings when I bought it. There's just no need. I know exactly what it does. It shows me what I need it to show me. And if I wanted a super fancy one with all kinds of buttons I could play with, I'd buy something else. But I love the simplicity and accuracy of that thing.
I think some people have preferences. I think I use the same blue background. Some people have definite preferences with respect to what color background and symbols you get on there, and that's totally like an individual preference thing. But
Paul McCluskey's wife just walked in, so we're going to revisit the cost. The cost of this bag is $200 retail, and it would be an excellent Father's Day gift.
And Paul deserves it.
Yeah,
and
You're worth it, Paul.
yes, he does need all those fishing rods.
You're worth it, Paul.
Cole's showing his wife the segment as well, so you deserve it as well, Cole. You work hard, you fish hard, and you deserve good stuff.
Oh man, that's good.
So pretty informative. I even picked up a few things, which is great. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. And
Well, that's a wrap.
I guess so.
that's
Let's shut her down.
pretty much it. Well, Rob told me to stick to 8 o'clock. We got an hour. So,
You got any? See if there's any last minute questions.
last minute questions.
We'll kick it up to 10 or 15 minutes so Rob can curse at the edit. But any last questions? Who's got the last one? None? We can shut it down then.
Okay, Terry, glad you showed up as well. Perfect, cool.
Yeah, thanks to everybody who came out.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I
Thanks.
guess you were right. It's time to shut it down.
There you
Let's
go. That's it.
There you go.
Perfect.
Thanks for tuning in, folks.
See you next time.